It's the Lily Factor. Ding! Salutations and welcome. So today I started out with a super quick portrait sketch of this character whose hair was supposed to be kind of like flower petals. And the reason it was quick was because I was going to use a certain art supply that you'll see momentarily, but the flower petal theme changed because things change when you're using gouache paints. I didn't really have a specific color scheme in mind for this, but I was thinking about using pinks. And so I started with this pinkish rose color, and I used this flat piece of plastic that actually came in the box with the gouache paints that I decided to use as a palette, which was perfect because it really helped blend the colors and everything without me having to use an annoying palette. And so it kind of worked out that way, but I'm laying down these pink colors in for the hair, and this is the second time I've ever used gouache paints. So I was kind of just tampering around and seeing, how do they react when you just lay it on there? How do they react with water? Are they buildable? Just trying to figure out all those little things that you try to learn about when it comes to a new paint. And I must say, I really love these paints. They kind of do everything I hoped acrylic paints could do for me. But I mean, at least I'm starting to like acrylic paints better, right? But yeah, I had set out the first coat of hair, and then I added some more colors on top, and as I figured out, gouaches are buildable. Probably the case for any art supply, but just depends on how it builds. Some work a certain way. And too, I didn't spend too much time waiting for every color to dry, so also have to see how it reacts when it's not quite dry yet. Then yellow. I added yellow because, well, I love yellow. So I'm kind of mixing in a little bit of white gouache paint with a yellow gouache paint, and I used that for the skin tone. And I was worried it was too yellow compared to the hair, but then I added some yellow onto the hair, and that's where things with the hair and the color scheme sort of change, because paints typically work that way. They always change your first initial idea. Paints are something else. So I added some yellow kind of for the highlights of the hair, but it ended up making it kind of orange. And then I finished adding the base color of yellow to the skin. And then after I set out all the base colors for the yellow, that's when I decided to kind of mix a red with the yellow and give it a sort of orange color. That way I could add some more shadows and such onto the face to make it look a little more rendered, but I also took a bit of the orangish yellow onto the hair. And that kind of helped blend it out and make the hair look a little less like I spilled watercolor on there and more like, oh, hey, I'm intentionally trying to paint here. Yeah. And then I started to add some shading onto the neck, but for some reason I'm starting to notice that anytime I add a shadow under the neck, it's never dark enough. I just always go back on top of that shadow. Also added a bit of shading under the nose. I feel like I'm starting to get kind of the hang of nose painting. It's always daunting, because you have to do those tiny little nostrils, and it just never seems like it's gonna go your way, but I don't know. I feel like I'm starting to become less frightened by the idea of painting a nose. Of course, whenever I add shadows, I always go on top of it with a little lighter color or just the same base coat of the paint just to blend out those colors. And I mean, that's what I do with acrylics, but with gouaches, it just does it the way I want acrylics to do it. Because acrylics dry so fast anyway, it just makes it hard to blend things. So I always have to really be quick with everything involving acrylics. Also used some red. I didn't want to use black for eyelashes or anything because I felt like that would kind of not really work for her really light pastel oranges and yellows. So I used red for her eyelashes and her eyebrows, and then I went over her pearl necklace, I guess is what it is, with some a little bit of paler red. And then I use that same color for like the shadows on the eyes. I don't ever add the pupils in on the eyes first when I'm painting, just because I feel like they always get kind of ruined, or they ruin like the eyelashes, and then I have to paint over the eyelashes again. So I always just add those last, because it spares me from some pain and heartache that way. Also used that lighter red color for the lips, and then I go with a pinkish color for the eyes. See, now I'm adding in the pupils and everything. Next, I go over it with like a darker pink, but it's barely visible. And then I was trying to harden like a lighter part in the inside of the mouth, and I ended up getting it on the teeth a bit, and I was like, oh no. So I ended up just giving her a little space in her front teeth, which I'm not opposed to, you know. Sometimes it's awesome looking on people, so can't have perfect teeth all the time, am I right? And then I go back and add some more shadows on that neck there that I probably didn't really need looking at it now, but you know, I think I just try to make those shadows really clear. And so I kind of smoothen it out later on with some more yellows and pinks and reds, and yeah, a lot of colors used, even though you just look at it and you're like, oh, yellow skin, or orangish yellow skin. But there's more to it than that. Always is. That's the art of paintings. They're telling you simpler colors than really how many colors they actually used. And then lastly, I used the leftover glops of paint on my brush, and I just kind of went around a background with it. And this time I actually, you know, squeezed that tube part of the brush to shoot out some water and make it kind of that watercolor side of gouache for the background. So that way it wouldn't just be like matching her skin tone for the background. We wouldn't want her to just kind of wash out as like this blob on paper. And yeah, gouache is like a perfect mix of when I want to do acrylic painting or watercolor, and then it's just slightly harder in color, or it's not as, it's easier to blend. And then I went on with a sketch of a dude. It wasn't like my favorite dude sketch. It was kind of just me like doing yet another really quick sketch because I just wanted to try the gouache paints. And once again, I wasn't really thinking about a color scheme, and this time it actually did not serve me well because I did not pick the greatest colors for this character. I added some green onto his pants, and I mean, it all starts out fine, but then towards the end I just get kind of bored with the drawing, and then B, it's like just all washed out. But you'll see what I mean. You'll see. So yeah, you can see that green is just really, it's that looseness of watercolor, but at the same time it has a much harder color than watercolor, and I don't need to reapply it so much. I know with watercolor I always have to go back to the palette every 5 brush strokes, and then acrylic paints I just get so nervous that I'm like, I barely put any paint on my brush. So gouache is like the anxiety-free type of paint. Yeah, so I really like gouaches. This is only the second time I've used them, but I really love these paints. I think I'm going to use them more. They're just really what I've been looking for in acrylic paints. And so they're really nice. They blend well. And now you guys can see how this color scheme is going wrong, huh? A lot of greens. Blech. But nevertheless, the color scheme really wasn't the important part. The important thing is gouaches. Beautiful, radiant gouache paints. The kind complement between acrylic paints and oil paints, both of which have their own personal flaws, but gouache is the nice mix between that causes less pain and heartache. I don't really know about that, but I do like gouache paints. Next, I kind of go with like some browns, and I make this sort of gradient on my palette, and then I just go over that with the skin tone. He's got kind of the dude has like this dull face. He's like, meh, you know, just kind of whatever kind of expression. So I had a little fun with that there. Then I used some blue mixed with green, yeah, more green, onto his sweatshirt. And just, yeah, I don't know about that color. But I did notice on that one, like sometimes the colors can be really loose like watercolor, and then other times they can be really hard and flat. And I'm not sure if it's just, it depends on like what you get from the tube, because there's like, in the tubes, there's liquid kind of sections, and then there's really just hard flat colors like acrylic paints in them. So I don't know if it just depends on what you get from the tube, or like I know for sure that when I mix colors together, then it becomes more thick like an acrylic paint. But I mean, if I wanted it to be more loose like watercolors, I could always just squeeze that brush and have some water come out for that. But I really only used that option of adding water to the brush in just like more of the backgrounds. And then I think a few times just when the paint was getting too dry. And then I also used some beige like on his sweatshirt, just to add a sort of not exactly lighting or even a shadow, I guess just really to give it a little more color onto that sweatshirt, just because it was kind of a blob. And then I used actually a brown for his eyes, like around where the eyelashes would be and everything. And then I used that same brown under the neck, because, you know, never dark enough. But and then I sort of blended that out, and then I used some more browns onto the hair, which I don't know if I regret per se, but I think it was fine the way it was. But it's not also like bad the way I did it. It really, though, it's not a big of a deal. I was just playing with gouaches, so no need to nitpick, Lily. But it was a fun illustration regardless. Like, it's not my favorite drawing I've done of a dude or I've done, but it was nice to just get that painting done. So that was my palette after those two paintings. I really didn't have to go overboard with like blending and using so many paint colors and such like I would with acrylic paints. Watercolor, I just don't even try blending. I just use the same color and go on top of it multiple times if I want to get a shadow or anything. And then towards the end, like I guess I had been drawing too long, but I was just pretty much done with like doing characters and stuff. So I kind of just did a brain dump where I just did some geometric circles and triangles and such. For really no reason. I just used the gouaches and painted a bunch of shapes. Nothing more to say there. But I was kind of testing around with, I noticed I could go on top of colors really easily, but there was also a way for me to not go on top of colors if I didn't want to. So like for that orange rectangle, I wanted it to be kind of like light in opacity, so to speak. So I was able to kind of do that on how like I used my brush strokes and everything, but I was also able to go right on top of that purple triangle with the green stroking a certain way as well. It was fun doing the star. I always like doing stars every now and then. Does anyone else know how to draw a star from scratch, or does everyone use like that kind of cursive technique for drawing stars? I'm just wondering. I remember when I was first starting out in art, that was like my life mission, was to be able to draw a perfect star without having to do the whole like scribble cursive technique. And towards the end, I kind of gotten the gist of it. I mean, that star isn't perfect, but I am using a paintbrush, and I haven't practiced it in a long time since that was something years ago that I cared about. And then everything was done. It was a really fun little spread, just trying out gouache paints. I'm sure the more I use these, the better I'll get, but I'm really happy with that little sunshine girl there. She didn't turn out like flower petal looking as I had originally planned, but she definitely turned out pretty good, and she kind of looks like a little ray of sunshine. So lastly, I signed my name on the drawing, and then the spread was completely finished. I must say, gouaches might become my new favorite paints if I use them more. So, thank you everybody for watching. Good luck in life and in art. Bye!